Hello, thank you for joining me. What I'd like to show you in this film is the constraints associated with the three walls that we drew, so we can conclude this assignment. Part of this assignment is to be able to put an adequate amount of constraints on this model in order to make it so if we move any one of these three walls, that all three walls move together. If they don't move all three together, you don't have the proper constraints in here. And think about constraints in the Revit models. You want to make sure that when you put in constraints that you think about it before you do so, and you use caution when you put constraints in. There's always a chance when we put too many constraints in a model that they begin to conflict with each other, and it makes your model rather inflexible and difficult to manage and modify. So use constraints when you need to, and the most basic constraint you could use is dimensions, and we are going to be using a lot of those. So let's go ahead and finish this model up. Let's go ahead and make all of our walls 16 feet. So if you click on a wall and it turns blue, it gives you the ability to take a dimension and actually change that. We're going to make that 16 feet, and there are some constraints in this, and I don't know of any, so we're going to go ahead and delete that constraint. So we're going to remove that constraint. So I'll make that a 16-foot wall. Another way to make that wall 16 feet or another wall is to stretch it out until you get a dimension on it that says the dimension you like, which is that one. Let's make that dimension permanent as long as we have it visible by going to the dimension symbol and clicking on it. And whoa, it's teeny tiny. So let's go down here. I was playing with this earlier, so my down here in my view control bar, my scale is actually 1:1, 12 inches equal to a foot. So let's go ahead and make it 1/8 of an inch is equal to a foot. That's a little bit more common, more of a common architectural scale. And I think it's a default scale that it starts you out with when you first start a model. So that looks a little bit better. The dimensions are readable. We'll make that to permanent. This one permanent. And this one, let's go ahead and change that just by typing in 16. Okay, a couple things we could do here. Now we want to constrain these so that this edge of this wall is collinear or coplanar with that edge and that edge. So let's use this as our base constraint. Let's take this and we'll move it. And if we move it, it should be able to pick up that polar tracking on the left-hand side, the light dash blue line. We're going to keep that there and lock it. Another way of doing this is to go to your Modify tab on your ribbon. Go to your Line tool. Click on that. First thing you want to do with your Line tool is click your static element, which is going to be this. Your dynamic element, which is going to be that. And it's going to move it into place, and we're going to lock it. Now this is what I mean by constraints, because sometimes we wanted that 16-foot dimension on this, which is no longer there. If you were to click on that, it's now like 15 feet and like, what, 89, 256 of an inch. Yikes. So, you gotta be careful about it. Let's just make that a permanent dimension and select it and just see if we can make that 16 feet. So it does stretch everything else out and stretch these out too, so that's kind of ugly. So, let's click on this, make that 16 feet. Here's how these constraints kind of conflict with each other. So how are we going to fix that? Well, I'll show you. We're going to use this as our static element when we make an Align tool modifications to it. And click on that guy and that guy after that, and then they all should be at 16 feet. So let's give that a try. Our static element for our alignment. Click on this is the one we're going to change. Lock it. Click on this one is for the one that we want to change. Yeah, let's get out of that tool because I think it was going to go ahead and change that one. So let's go back to the Align tool. That's our static element. That's our dynamic element. And then we're going to lock that. One last thing we need to do is make sure that these walls are 6.5 feet from each other. Alright, that's already set at 6.5 feet, so that's okay. And this one, not quite at 6.5 feet. So let's go ahead and do that, make that a permanent dimension. And that should be locked, that should be locked. And to test all this, take a wall and move it, any wall. And they should all move as a block. And this one didn't. So for some reason this didn't lock, so let's go ahead and change that. We'll make that 6 feet, 0.5 feet. Let's bring that dimension a little bit closer to the other one. And when you click on that dimension, you have the ability to padlock it. Let's click on this dimension. That should be padlocked. That dimension, that should be padlocked, so that doesn't change. That should be padlocked. That should be padlocked. So now, if we click on any wall, all the walls should move together in one fine block. Okay, that's the requirement for this assignment. Let me know if you have any questions about that. We'll talk to you soon.